Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education University, and I'm your host, Tim Bogatz. Summertime. It is here, or if it's not here for you yet, it will be very soon. So just be patient. You are close. For us as art teachers, summer is the time where we can rest, we can relax, we can recharge. And for a lot of us, that means making art. We have the time, finally. And now it's just a matter of finding the inspiration we need and getting ourselves started. So I want to talk today about how we find inspiration and how we can sort of go through the art making processes now that we have the time, and allow ourselves to create, to make more art. And joining me today will be Juana Meneses, an artist and educator from Miami. She has so many great ideas about making art, finding inspiration, staying creative, which all of those things I think are absolutely vital right now. And Juana is also the instructional designer for the newest AOEU course called Rediscovering Your Artistic Identity. It's an awesome grad course. I talked really briefly about it last week and promised you a little more discussion on it today. So here we are. I was looking at the syllabus for the course a couple hours ago, and honestly, it looks fantastic. It's a 1 credit hour course. It dives really deep into the art making process and gives you so many pieces of inspiration, so many incentives, so many prompts to figure out your process and to figure out what's going to work for you to make your work. And so I want to talk about all of that today, about creativity, about the art making process, about everything we need to be creative, to be artists over the summer. So Juana is here. Let me bring her on and we'll go ahead and get our discussion started. All right, and Juana is joining me now. Juana, how are you?
I'm pretty good, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to chat with you about just rediscovering artistic identity, art making, all of those great things that I think are really appropriate right now. Before we dive into that, though, can you introduce yourself and tell our audience just a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm an artist, right? An educator, obviously.
Yeah.
But really, I came. I think one of the most important things is that I came to art making. I guess as an immigrant. I mean, I think it's like that's really where my art making comes from, right? So I moved to the U.S. when I was 11, and I didn't speak English. And
Okay.
so for me, art making, it just became my identity, right? Like I was the kid that could draw, right? And I know many of us are that kid, right? But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it became like the way that I understand the world and the way that I processed everything. So, obviously I learned English. It was all good, da 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 da. And I went to art school, and then when I was in Chicago, actually, I went to SAIC. I had to get an internship, right? And so there was an awesome internship at the Chicago Cultural Center, and which was like amazing, right? Like the best
Yeah.
place, like the
Yeah.
most beautiful place ever. And that's how I found teaching. I mean, I was assisting, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I realized like I loved, these kids would come in, they would see an exhibition, and then we would walk them through an activity. And that's really where, teaching began. Like I realized like I actually loved it. Like it fed me, right? It fed my spirit and it fed my art making and it fed everything. So it was like, how lucky am I, right? Like, cause it was so organic and it was not, it was really, it was just very, very lucky for me, really. Like now I look back and I'm like, wow. So after that, I came back to Miami, and I made work. Like I worked as a gallery artist. Like I actually like, sold a ton of work, and it helped me like pay my student loans, like all this stuff, right? It was really nice. And then I knew I wanted to develop my work more. So I went out to LA, and I have an MFA from a school out there, and I kept teaching, right? Like I taught in museums and galleries and that sort of thing, and then in higher ed too. And all along, right? Like it's like I'm making work and I'm teaching, and again, it's like I'm not really even that conscious like how important teaching is becoming to
Right.
who I am. It's very interesting, you know? So that's where my identity as an artist educator like comes from, and it gets more and more pronounced as time goes by. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
me.
awesome. No,
Yeah.
I love how that all sort of came together for you. I think that's really cool. Now you talked a little bit about your art making. I want to ask more about that if we can. Can you tell us a little bit about your art? Can you tell us where you find inspiration, or just how you kind of follow your curiosity when it comes to creating or comes to making art?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, because I'm an immigrant, right? And again, this idea of finding my identity, like defining my identity, right? It wasn't as clear cut. It wasn't something that I was just given, like, oh, this is where you're from, and this is who you are. And so for me, because I also came here when I was 11, so it's the sort of thing
Hmm.
where I was at this moment where I was starting to understand who I was. And so that's where the beginning of my art, which that happens to many of our students, right? Like identity and who they are and their voice and all of that. And then things start to shift, and I start to think about the identity of place also that happens, and the way that identity is constructed, right? And
Hmm.
so, and when I was in Los Angeles, that was a lot of what I was interested in. I mean, I was out,
Yeah.
going out to the desert and thinking about, the stories we tell ourselves, right? About ourselves and about place, and how
Hmm.
those things are weaved in, right? Which makes a lot of sense also in the classroom. Like that helps me a lot in the classroom as well.
Yeah.
So, and helping my students think about those things. And so now I'm back in Miami, and I start to think about, okay, well, I go on walks, I pick up leaves, I pick up, I want to know about the stories about the neighborhood where I live. I want to
Yeah.
know about the story of my city. I'm also very interested in archives, right? I have a
Hmm.
family, I do a lot of things. So, how do I weave those things in? Is that now it's become about the story of my city and my neighborhood and the places that I go to. But it's all the same thing, right? It's just keeping that thread of identity, and that's how my work. It's all the same thing. I always tell my students it's just about what you privilege, right? Like the thing that you're most interested in at the time, but it's all the same. It's all about its stories and identity. So
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that is good for a lot of people. I think that that's sort of a universal experience where, you are trying to find the stories that make up your life and translate those into your art, into your creating. And I guess that kind of brings me to my next question, because I think a lot of teachers are beginning to think about that right now, because it is summertime. Art making becomes easier for us in the summer, and a lot of teachers get back into creating.
yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing. But I think the issue is that, like, when we go back to school, when we're back to it in the fall, things get a lot more difficult. So, do you have any tips, just as an artist, for teachers who are trying to create? Like, how can they sustain their artistic practice when, times get busier, when things get more hectic? Like, what is the way they can approach art making to make sure they can still find time to create?
Yeah, so I think, well, the things that have worked for me are making sure that I build it in. And what I mean by that is,
Hmm.
that meant before it meant, oh, well, let me go to my studio. I mean, I
Right.
know that doesn't happen for me anymore either, right?
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
don't have that time. That I just don't have it. But what I do have is I literally have my watercolor kit. I mean, I show my students. I teach watercolor as well, which I love.
Hmm.
And I literally have it all ready. Like it is built in. I have my small palette of colors that I have chosen that I like. I have my watercolor brush. I have everything is portable. I have like a tiny little like spray bottle. I mean, it is like
Yeah.
miniature,
Yeah.
everything. I make my own artist books as well. So everything is done
Hmm.
ahead of time though. I think that that's key
Yeah.
so that the bag is ready. All I have to do is grab that bag and throw it in my book bag or in my beach bag or whatever it is. If I'm allowed to think about it, like, oh, I have to go get whatever, it will never happen. So what I suggest is, or having like notes. Maybe you're better with notes and you
Mm-hmm.
need, you write things down. I love mind maps as well. And so I also love, I have another notebook that has my favorite pen. And
Yeah.
that one is also easy and small. This is key for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not heavy, that I can again throw in. So I also don't tell myself that I'm not allowed to do something in a particular book. I'm
Mm-hmm.
allowed to do whatever I want in whatever book I have at hand. It's all good. So
Yeah.
I think making sure that you have made those systems, put those systems in place before you have to make that choice of like, am I going to make art or not? It's like, no, no, no. You are going to make art because it's already the stuff
Yes.
that you need is
Yes.
already in your hand. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important. And my second tip is also just, whatever you're curious about, just follow it, right? Like, so I talked before about, picking up a leaf. I'm like, literally, like, I will pick up leaves. Like, my family knows I'm like ridiculous. Like, I pick up everything off the ground, like it's so bad. But then, like, those apps, like, that where you can identify, the leaf or the plant or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is a native plant, or this is not a native plant. And how cool. And like, so I allow myself to follow those tangents, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it's gonna lead me. Maybe it won't lead me to anything, right? But maybe in the end, again, it'll be about that history of place. And then I'll find out that this tree has been there for 100 years, and that it took 100 years to, to give, fruit and flower. And this has happened too. And so then it becomes again about the identity of place. But when I pick up
Mm-hmm.
that leaf, I just think it's a cool leaf,
Yeah.
you know, but I let
No.
myself do that. I think that
Well,
that's also important.
yeah, I love that. And I think it's just a really organic way to develop, some of those stories we tell. And like you said, sometimes it doesn't lead to anything, but when it does, it's incredibly meaningful and it makes for great work and great conversation about your work as well. So I think that's
Yeah.
a really good thing.
And
Um,
it
Go
just
ahead.
connected one more thing. Being
Yeah.
constant is the other thing.
Hmm.
So like I pick up a lot of those leaves, right? Or and so I trust that picking up all those leaves adds up to something. So that's the other thing. Even if I don't want to take my watercolor sketchbook with me, I will tell myself take it anyway. And then I'll end
Yeah.
up opening it up and I'll make some doodle. So I think also being constant. I think that is the other key.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice as well. The next thing I wanted to talk about was just kind of I don't know, the connection between art making and teaching. I think that's a big question for a lot of us. So I guess I'll just put it to you fairly simply, like, how does your art making translate, or how does it inform the teaching that you do?
Well, first of all, I like to share with my students what I'm interested in. Even if I know like it's not like their thing, I think it
Yeah.
helps for them to, I think it helps for them to know that I have passions, and then again
Hmm.
that I will support theirs because I'm curious about the world, right? And so I love making zines. Like, and my students know, like, I
Yeah.
love making zines. I love it. I think it's fun, all these different things. And so then they recognize, oh, she has this other, outside passion. So I think that's important. And also, whenever possible, I would always give my students options for bringing something, their personality or their interest into the classroom. So if it was an object that they had to draw, they they brought their object. If it was a story they had to tell, it was their story. If it was, all of those things, like every time there's a choice, they're allowed to bring something in, because I think if it's not their voice, then it doesn't matter. Like if it's just about the technique, I mean, I'm passionate about the technique, but they might
Yeah.
not be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we're creating that safe space for them, then they have to be allowed to tell their story, right? So try to make open those doors and leave allow them to explore also. Like, we give ourselves that time to explore, and sometimes we want our students to produce these beautiful polished pieces so quickly, and
Mm-hmm.
we can't do that. So why do we expect that from our students? So leave time also for the experimentation, and that sort of thing is I think really really important.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I wanted to ask you too, just as you're sharing interests, as you're hearing about your students and their interest, does the reverse ever happen where what's happening in your classroom or what's happening in your teaching, does that ever come back to your art? Like, does your teaching ever inform your art practice?
Yes, so many times, because I if I'm if I it makes me feel, sometimes I realize that I may have been rigid about an idea
Mm-hmm.
or a way of working, and my students are awesome and so much better at something, and I'm like, oh my god, of course, like that was is
Yeah.
such a much better way of doing it, or making the order, or just being, they're much more open and free sometimes about the way they make. So it's a
Yeah.
good reminder for me. It's like, oh,
Yeah. I think so.
yeah.
I always love that when my students can kind of challenge my thinking on things where, they say, why don't we do it like this? Or have you ever tried this? I'm like, let's do it. I love hearing that from my students.
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's there's so much more fresh. And so that's definitely something
Hmm.
that I love about teaching. I mean, every time at every level, right? A student will
Yeah.
will ask you, well, what about this? And you're like, of course, that's such a great connection to make. So I think leaving always room for that is like one of the best things about teaching, right? Like, that's, I never want to stop teaching, like at any level, because it just refreshes me every single time. Plus I have to keep current, right? Like, I have
Yeah.
to go find out. If a student is like, what about this? I'm like, oh my God, you're right. I have to go find out about that. So
Yeah. That's awesome. It keeps you curious, and that's a good thing. Now,
yeah.
before I let you go, I do want to ask you about the new course that you put together called Rediscovering Your Artistic Identity. I'm super excited for this one, but can you tell people kind of what kinds of things they'll be learning in the course, the opportunities they have, and just kind of the art making that they're going to be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy about it as well, because it's like, it's such a passion area for me that I love.
Mm-hmm.
The beginning of the course is all about ideation and idea creation, which I think, without that, obviously, you can't sustain your practice. So a lot of it was about putting together resources for anyone that wants to either connect to their art making or reconnect to that art making, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
mind mapping, and there's all these different ways of generating ideas.
Yeah.
So that's the beginning of the course, like really strong generation of ideas, and lots of different ways, right? Because we all know that, like, what may work for you now might not work for you later. So even if
Yes.
in the course yeah, like, even if in the course you're like, I love this, but later on maybe you want to try something else. So really, I'm really big on lots of choices and being able to direct your own discovery, right? So there's definitely that at the beginning of the course, and then we double back and think about midpoint critique. So still, you're in this place where you're already excited about what you're making, things are happening and they're clicking, but then how do you move forward? And I feel like that happens a lot with at all levels. It's like, okay, now you're in this place where you're feeling good, but how do you resolve,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we talk about that as well. Like, how do you help you move forward and resolve and evolve this series of work? And it's really more about the series of work rather than just one piece, because
Yeah.
the idea is that you're going to get tools to keep going, right? It's a short 3-week course, so it's really like to spark that practice and give you tools to continue without me, right? Without the instructor. Like, that's key. I always tell all my students that, like, really, it's about, I want you to have everything and then you can run with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then the end of the course is about, yes, you're presenting these couple of pieces and then also talking about it. And of course, giving feedback to others as well. And we also are building a digital gallery as well, walkthrough.
Yeah.
So there's other tools as well and how to take those things into your classroom too.
All right, that all sounds really great. So, Juana, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us about your art, your teaching, and the new course. I think it was all really, really valuable. So, thank you so much.
Oh my God. Thank you, Tim.
Juana had so many great things to say, so many good pieces of advice, so much to take from that conversation. A couple things that stood out to me. She talked about how in her process and how in this course, art making is not just about creating a one-off. You know, it's about finding what you need to create a more significant amount of work. You know, it's about getting in the habit of finding inspiration, and the course is giving you ideas on how to use that inspiration. And there are so many options on how to refine or how to fine tune or how to find new ideas for your art making process. So if you're getting into making more art this summer, or if it's a goal of yours to do more creating, to do more art making in the next few months, you know, I really think it would be worthwhile for you to check out the Rediscovering Your Artistic Identity course. You can find everything you need. You can register. You can learn all that you need about it at theartofeducation.edu/courses. And if you decide that a graduate course isn't in the cards for you this summer, there's still nothing stopping you from creating and making art. So take Juana's advice, like have your art making materials accessible, have your go bag with all of your favorite medium, and give yourself permission to create, give yourself time to create. And you know what? Just go pick up some leaves. You never know where they may lead. Art Ed Radio is produced by the Art of Education University with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next week.